Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. We have a special guest in the studio. Eric and I have been looking forward to this moment. We've been going back and forth to the schedules, and we made it happen. So with us in the studio is Chelsea Meyer. She is the founder and CEO of Dental Life Coach. We're honored to have you on the podcast today, so thank you for joining us, Chelsea.
Thanks for having me.
And then, as always, in the studio is the man himself, the wonderful Mr. Eric Morin, joining us back.
Glad to be here. It's been a few weeks. We've been off for a few weeks. What's going on, Matthew? We're back, though.
It's summertime, so we've had quite a busy summer, I would say. You've been out of town. I've been out of town. Reese has been on jury duty. We've been just about everywhere in the last few weeks. So we're glad to bring back some energy to you guys. As always, as you know, like, subscribe, follow us on YouTube for the actual visual version of this. We are on Spotify as well, so make sure you check those out. But we've been kind of going back and forth with Chelsea for a while now, trying to make this happen. So first and foremost, just tell us a little bit about your background. What do the listeners need to know in order to get a full scope of what Dental Life Coach is?
Sure, thanks. And thank you for that introduction. You know, I began my professional career at Wells Fargo Bank. Didn't expect to get into professional coaching, but that first job ended up being that, and which led me to doing some similar projects in public education, which led me to dental. And what I learned in all three of those, while they seem like really different animals, and in some respects they are, the focus of my work was always working with high performers who were wanting to create productive, repeatable results. And what I learned is that sometimes the things that qualify us to be really fantastic in certain arenas can be the very things that put blinders on in other areas where we would also like to grow and develop. And so my passion is taking people who have a zest for what they're doing and figuring out what the gap is between where they are and where they want to go.
In a nutshell, that's awesome. I think we always talk about blinders on the podcast and things that they can get better at. I think sometimes people focus in so much on the numbers and they forget to focus on the emotional side of it. And I think that's, something that's lacking in the industry. So I know you and Eric, I believe, met at Hinman, correct? Is that where you guys were first introduced and you kind of started talking and then you kind of went from there, right?
I actually think I saw the content you were putting out, Chelsea, and I was intrigued by the content. And I think that was what first actually grabbed me. It was interesting. We just did our high net worth group, and so we were talking about we do so much with numbers and those types of things, but we were talking about identity and vision and all these types of things, mental work that needs to be done. And then it's like at the end of it, Stockton came up and they were like, "This is what I need. I need the mental work, and I need to focus on my ability to really change my mental game and those types of things." And so I think this work is so powerful, and I think that we see limitations all the time. And so I think the first time I saw a Dental Life Coach, I think right away I was like, "Okay, what is this?" And I want to know exactly what this is, because I think that's so important. And so I think I called you or set up a meeting and I was like, "Tell me more about Dental Life Coach. I want to know what that is," because it's such an intriguing name of a company. And I said, "Gosh, tell me more." So that's, I think, where I jumped in. I was just curious about Chelsea and the work you do. And I was like, let's set up a phone call. I just want to know the kind of work you do, because I just think this stuff is so powerful.
Thank you. And to tie it into what you guys are doing over there, I think, building your portfolio, building your wealth is such a personal, and I'd even say spiritual experience, can be. Simultaneously, it can be really destructive if we don't have the right mindset around things. And particularly if we're looking externally, even though those are really great, our numbers, we should be keeping track of our numbers. We should know where we're at. We should be running those reports and keeping our eye on the ball so we can know where to pivot or what trajectory we're on, right? But when that becomes the reason that we are worthy or the reason that we feel good, it can become a really treacherous process and be so much more, it's almost it's incredibly uncomfortable, and it almost becomes just something that you do rather than living the dream. And that's where I found myself. I had partnered in some practices, and I was on the phone with my mom, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're living the life of your dreams," and I'm like, this doesn't feel like the life of my dreams. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating. My marriage isn't great. Like, nothing was good. And it had nothing to do with my husband or, our zip code. It had everything to do with me and how I was approaching things. And that's when I hired my first executive coach, and my eyes were just open, and I'm like, wow. Everybody in this industry needs this. They need to at least know that it exists. If they don't want it, they need to know it's there.
And I think I get, so you're aware, basically any call that ever comes into Tower Leadership, I take it. I kind of want to be the gatekeeper a little bit. And most of the time I have them fill out a questionnaire before they even have a conversation with me. And a lot of them are always, you can see the emotion come out in just a simple questionnaire where it's like, I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm not where I want to be. I don't kind of know what to do at this standpoint. I feel like my business is successful, but I just feel like I'm not at the place yet. And I have to kind of like walk them off a ledge a little bit sometimes. I'm like, okay, you're actually doing pretty good for where you're at right now. There's a lot of things we can do, but we have to tell them you are doing okay. You're right where you need to be. It always comes to light. Things happen for us, not to us, and then we can move forward from there. So the aspect of, being kind of a coach on that aspect is something that I think I've personally seen just from my conversations is very needed in the dental industry.
I love what you said, that things happen for us, not to us. I have my own I believe everything is rigged in my favor, everything. And I strongly recommend that everybody come up with your own mantra, your own saying, your own phrase, something that you can, at least a different lens that you can try on when it seems hopeless, because it's not. It doesn't have to be.
The gap and the gain, old Dan Sullivan, the idea of focusing on the now. And it's funny. I mean, I just even think about, because I always think about self-imposed limitations and growth and those things. But you're right. I was going through an exercise recently, Chelsea, that I was in a group and we were talking about, you were supposed to write down the most challenging thing that happened in your business, or some of the most challenging things, 2, 3, 4 of them that you wrote down. You're like, this is what happened. It was horrible. And this is what happened. It was horrible. And the whole thing almost fell apart. And then you wrote those things down. And then next to it, you wrote down what you did to overcome that. And it was like, okay, what did you do now to overcome that challenging time? Whatever it was, COVID, 2008, whatever it was, maybe it was a personal thing. And you went over it. And then it was like, how did you then transform your business because of that challenge? And then when we looked through it, we were like, wow, holy moly, if it wasn't for those things, those challenges, those difficult things, I wouldn't have done this, or this. So our business wouldn't be where it is today. And it is those things that happen for us. And it's like going through that exercise, I was like, man, I hate to say this, but I don't want to throw that out in the universe, but more challenges are coming my way, maybe not a bad thing. And so I think that those are when we tap. I got to be careful. I would throw that out. Tomorrow's going to happen. But it is. I think that the idea of, I was actually having a conversation this morning with somebody over a cup of coffee, and I was saying, being an ambitious person, wanting to create wealth and net worth and enterprise and build companies and those types of things, I said, those things are all great. And it's part of, for instance, my own natural wiring, wanting to do those things and then wanting to help others do those things. But I was saying to this person, I said, I never want to live in angst, though. I don't want to live in the angst of then I'll be happy. Once I get there, then I'll be happy. At that point, then I'll really, really be happy. And I was in, it was a few months back, I was in this billionaire's home and flew down to see him, and I was sitting there in his house in Naples, Florida, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, I don't know if this guy's any happier than I am. That was really impactful. It really was, because I was like, I don't know if this guy's any happier. I mean, his home's nice and those types of things. So, but I was like, I don't know that he's happier. So it's like, I was having this conversation this morning. I was like, I choose to be happy today. I choose to live in the present today, being intentional today, live life today, be thankful for all the things I have. And all those other things are just a blessing in the future, and they're great, but they're not the end all and be all. The idea of living in complete misery and angst because you're eventually, then when my practice gets to 4 locations, 5 locations, when I have an 8 times multiple, whatever, then I'll be happy. And it's well, life's pretty good today. So, because I feel like you come from a better energy, right? I mean, maybe you come that energy of thankfulness, of gratitude, of those types of living in that moment. Doesn't that make people have an energy of attraction anyhow?
Absolutely. Here's the problem. When you've identified something outside of yourself at a time that isn't now, that is what is going to make you happy, that's the right thing, that's the acceptable circumstance, that makes everything else right here unacceptable. It's the wrong thing. And so instead of working from a place of abundance and a place of gratitude and creating more of what you want, you're in this notion of getting out of what you don't. So while some of the behaviors may be the same, the energy is completely different.
Yeah.
How would you say, when you're working with your clients, how much of it is focused in on, I guess, the mental energy side of it, and how much is focused on the business side of it, if you had to break it down on a percentage?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm afraid I'm going to answer your question a little more ambiguously than you're asking, and I'm talking to a numbers guy, so I got to be careful here. But
no, I think it's important for the audience to know, because I know they're listening, they're relating. It's like, am I in this percentile, or am I thinking too much about this? So I think it's good relevance.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, are they really that different? I mean, if something terrible happens at home, you really show up and do the best clinical work the next day? Absolutely not. Does your team even want to approach you? Absolutely not. I gave a talk at the Oak Point Doctor Symposium earlier this year, and at the end of it, I did a live podcast with one of the partners that I've been working with, and by the end of that podcast, the whole room was like clapping and cheering. And it's not because of anything I did, it's because of the transformation that this person described through leadership development. And I always say that leadership is relationships, and relationships begin with you. And so I work with some of the most amazing and talented people. None of my clients are broken. They don't need my help, but we all have areas where we want to improve and grow. And when we can break through and experience those transformations, it's infectious.
It's funny. It just made me think of something, when this company was started a long time ago, I assumed that we would get a lot of people coming to Tower that were struggling mentally, that they were these kind of broken type people, right? And that's not what happened. I totally agree. It was like all these people that were ambitious and successful and already doing well, who had hit a wall, and they were like, I'm just trying to get to the next place in my career, in my life. Those people are what we attracted. And I think the message of leadership, I agree with you. I mean, one of the reasons why this was called Tower Leadership is because it was like, if we got to start with you, right? To have more, you just simply become more, right? You just have to work on you, become more. And I'm a huge fan of coaching. I invest a lot of money in my own personal coaching, and I think that, and not only do I do it, now am I a member, but I'm also a client or whatever. I mean, I think when you're someone who believes in that, which is that the more you invest in yourself, the more you invest in your own mindset, the more you attract that, the more you become, the more you're going to build in, you're going to be able to provide value in conversations, the more that people are going to want to spend time with you. It's like you attract success, right? When you become, ultimately people are chasing success, but it's like, no, you attract it by who you become, right? We can pull success in. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it is such a more predictable pull that you can have when you're really focused. Who was it? I think it was Gary Vee was saying one time, you can either focus on building your tower or you can focus on knocking someone else's down, but you can't simultaneously do the same and be as effective at either, right? And I feel like it's the same thing. I can either go chasing after and trying to sell each individual person on why they should want to network with me and why I should be in their circle, or I can do a really good job of creating the environment and the energy that will attract other people. And, the marketing does itself. The people will hear it, see it, talk about it, and they will tell other people about it.
I think Ritz-Carlton basically built their whole brand off of that. I mean, it's one of the most popular hotel chains in the world, and all they did was just take care of people. Like, that was their biggest thing, was like, we'll give an amazing experience and we'll take care of people, and then people will find out about it. And I think you hit it spot on with the leadership, and I saw Eric kind of light up, because I was like, yes, this is the direction he wanted this podcast to go. Because we could talk, there's two things we could talk about more than anything on this podcast, is marketing and leadership. So when it comes to the leadership component of it, one of the reasons why we found successful people, like people wanted to come work with Tyler Leadership that were successful, was when you start working with people and you, inevitably speaking, want to work on leadership, there's certain ones that want to hear that, and certain ones that are like, just tell me about my numbers. And they just push the leadership to the side. And if you just focus, I think 99% of doctors need to realize, if you just focus on your leadership of the organization, personal, professional, you will become more successful. That's where you start, is your leadership, your team's leadership. You start building that out. I think it's kind of an issue right now that I see, is just there's so much focus in on EBITDA, valuation, numbers. How do I get this? My team members turnover. If you just focus in on leadership, you'd be in a better off position. So that was like perfect statement you had, Chelsea. I was like, yeah, now we're moving.
I think that's the quick fix, right? Which is like, the quick fix is like, just give me my numbers. Just tell me what to do. Just tell me where do I put money at, and then everything will happen. People will come to me, and patients will pour out of the sky. And it's like, you actually have to focus on yourself, right? And it's like I share sometimes where people. I had a doctor once tell me, there are no good people in Atlanta. Like, I just can't find a good person in Atlanta. 8 million people. I guess you can't find one. And so I said to this doctor, I was like, it's you. It's you. It's not the 8 million people, it's you. And those are, he didn't want to hear it at the time, but I think he accepted it. So I love that. I think that's why I'm so intrigued by the type of work you do, Chelsea, because I think that people need to know about this type of work. So tell us more about the work you do. Tell us about Dental Life Coach. Tell us, as much as you want to. We'd love to hear all about the type of work you do.
Yeah, well, really, what I do, I spend my time kind of in three areas. There's the podcast, which I'm excited she'll be on later today. And then there is the in-person stuff. So I'll do retreats or workshops, things of that nature, working with individuals or groups. And then there's the coaching, which again is individuals or groups. And so within the scope of those things, I've learned over the past decade that there are usually 13 areas that we need to master as individuals who want to lead other people. And we come to the table with certain strengths, and we come to the table with certain areas of opportunity, but all areas need to be discovered, uncovered, and then where needed, improved. And so when I'm meeting with someone, I want to learn about their goals, or the organization. I want to learn about the organization's goals and the direction that we want to head, and what are the known areas of improvement needed. And then usually when I start talking to each individual or the groups, then I can understand, okay, a little bit more about the culture or the mindset or the background. All of those things usually play into what's happening now and what changes we want to make.
So who would you say is kind of, ideal client? So if you had to pinpoint that, we ultimately, Eric and I sat down probably 6 months, seems like yesterday, and it was pretty much the beginning of the year, and we were ultimately like, we want to work with entrepreneurs, not create them. So if you had to say your ideal target market is boom, what would that be?
Doctors and executives. So if it can be individual or group, but they're doctors or executives who are aware that they are aware and ready to do some deep work to grow as individuals, and as they do that, they want to be able to better lead teams and grow their organizations. So, and I will say this, what got my foot in the door at Wells Fargo Bank is I studied business finance. I understand that the importance of that component too. But what I saw there was that in order to make those things happen and keep the teams cohesive and have the individuals not losing their mind just solely trying to pretend that numbers were the only important thing, we had to take care of the human component, which is why I decided to continue my education in human motivation and behavioral changes. And so when you marry those two things together, I really think that's what sets these organizations and these individuals apart, because at this point, there are so many talented individuals out there that can come in and tell you just what are the numbers, what do I need to do, what do I need to increase, what services do I need to offer so that all the patients will come. But if your team isn't sticking around because they don't want to be around you and your office is more of a revolving door than anything, then it kind of doesn't matter, because two things. One, you're always going to be in that retraining, onboarding, trying to hang on to the people you've got, hoping that your patients come back, for their cleanings and check-ins. And you are a mess. And that's the bigger thing, right? You're miserable and you go home and you come back and you're miserable, and it's this perpetuating cycle. And so it actually doesn't matter if you have that house. I forget where you say you were in Florida, but it actually doesn't matter where you're lying in bed at night and getting up each morning. If you're miserable, you're not actually experiencing it. And that is what I learned personally. And that is the message that I love to share, because when things change, everything changes. And then it's like, you just turn the lights on to this beautiful existence.
Let me ask you a question. What about the doctor that's got their stuff together? So, right, a lot of the doctors that listen to this podcast, and we know a lot of them, are really successful. They're great leaders. They do well. They care about their team. They've done self-work. That's why they have 4 or 5 locations, 20 locations, whatever it is. They do a lot of self-work. And so, what do you say to the person who's done a lot of self-work, who feels that they've read enough, books, they've done some coaching, but they're, we're always wanting to prove, because I find those people are always transformational. They're always looking for the next leg up. So so what about those people, the people that are listening to the podcast that say, well, maybe I don't need Chelsea. I've got my stuff together. Like I already have my Tony Robbins playbook or whatever it is, and I feel good. And so what about that person? How does that person fit in?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question, because for that person, what we do is we have the advanced levels of mastered coaching. And so, that's just what we title it. But what it is we're saying, okay, you've got it all together. What are your doctors doing? What are your leaders doing? What's your regional doing? Are they also creating those transformational experiences for your employees? Because ultimately, we want our team members to leave our organization whenever they do, having been being a better person because they were a part of it. We want them to look back and realize, hey, I grew. I was a part of something that was moving and growing. I contributed and I was contributed to. And so maybe you've got it all together, Doc. That's fantastic. What about your associates? How are they? What about your other partners? How are they? What about your other managers and leaders? How are they? Because we want every single person to be a leader within their spot in that organization, so that it's an ever-growing machine.
What would you say is, I guess, do you have like any indication of like when you start working with someone that they're going to grasp the material? Like, is there, like an identity behind that? So when someone's listening to this, they're like, that's me. I know this, like this fits my mold. This is what it looks like. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah. So some of the things that we're saying, we're all living in the same resource condition where, COVID did a lot of things. And one of the things that I'm noticing when I'm doing exit interviews, especially, is people aren't leaving their jobs because they found one closer to home or they got a pay raise. They're leaving their jobs because of their perception of their experience at work. We have heightened awareness of how we feel in every situation, okay? And so what we want to do is be able to create environments where people feel safe and there's trust there, and they look forward to being there the next day, because in truth, they can get really, really good at selling something on YouTube and never have to leave their home if they don't want to. We need them to want to be in our organizations and be a part of our team. And when I'm talking to people, and the research backs me up on this, but when I'm talking to people, the word that they're using isn't team or tribe or friends. The word that people are looking for that keeps them coming back day after day and year after year is family. And so we have to get really clear on what it is that we're building, so that we can make sure that everything we do and say, and the decisions that we make and the decisions that we walk away from, right? Because every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. We need to make sure that that's all aligned with the thing that we're building.
That mindset around family and around what you're building, there's 2 things that really stood out to me, what you just said, Chelsea, which was, first is that this idea of people are going to leave your organization. And that is something that we as founders, as CEOs, that we don't ever want to see anyone leave, right? We take it as sometimes a personal insult. But the truth is, the greatest thing we can do is leave someone better than we found them, right? To have people be better off because they were part of our organization. One of my hardest things I had to deal with was the idea that people weren't going to stay with me for the rest of my career. Like, I thought, you're going to be with Tower forever. I thought we would all get tattoos and stuff, and like we would all like do this forever. But then having to realize that eventually that not everybody will stay for the whole career. Some people will, some people won't. They'll move on, and the best thing you can do is provide that opportunity for them to be better and to build a better life for them, it's not what common conversations are. They're not the common conversation, but it becomes an uncommon energy that you bring into that situation when you actually care about people and you actually want them to do well. And that's huge. And I love the idea of family as well, because I always tell doctors, please stop using the word employees, stop using the word staff. Oh my gosh. And I go, the idea, I'm like, staff's an infection. Like, that's not what we call our team. And so this idea, I was saying, because the word employee is a transactional word, right? You're an employer. Like, I don't walk up to him, hi employer, how are you doing today, right? It's a very transactional word. And so I don't love the word employee. It's because it allows us to have an arm's length transaction with somebody. I'll pay you money, you do this job, versus when you're building a family, when you're building a team, when you're actually trying to live for today and not, it's not about what you can get from somebody, but it's about what you can provide. And that's a different mindset for a lot of people. It's like, trust me, if you serve them, if you help them and help them live a better life and get what they want, they'll help you. And that's a different mentality than the marketplace, which just says these are transactions. You take from these people, you take from whatever they can provide you, and it's all about the KPI and it's about nothing else. And when they no longer become useful, you dispose of them. And it's a very transactional type mentality. And it sounds like we're much more aligned in our thoughts on that idea of not having a transactional leadership process, but a truly transformational one.
Absolutely. And dentists, I have learned, are some of the most caring and loving individuals. And so it really is more aligned with who many of them are anyways, if we can make ourselves vulnerable and open up to the possibility of truly loving the people that we have in our offices and in our buildings. And at the same time, acknowledging that by loving them, we're putting ourselves at risk to lose them and to go through that experience. But you really can't have one without the other. You don't get to experience the full joy of loving people and building this incredible unity and have it not be a painful experience later when people move on. And at the same time, you don't get the beauty of it if you don't put yourself out there.
So do you have to coach people through that? Because I think, here's like coaching corner. Like, I'm going to be vulnerable here for a second, right? That was really hard for me. Like, it really was, right? And now I'm on the couch, by the way, Chelsea. So like, that was hard, right? I mean, I'll lay on the couch. Help me out, Chelsea. No, yeah. I mean, that was that was difficult for me. Like, I really struggled with it. I will tell you, I struggled with that. I really did. It was the same thing as they say, if you want to fall in love, you have to take the risk of getting hurt, right? It's the same thing. I think it's like, when you care about, because that's the other side of this, right? Let's just say we don't make it transactional, we make it transformational, which means you care about people, right? Which is, I had a coach one time told me, like, maybe, Eric, they don't want to get to know you that well and they don't want to be your best friend. Maybe they just want to work for you, right? Stop being everyone's best friend and maybe you're just their employer. And so this idea of, like, when we actually care about people, when we actually put our hearts into making, or calling them family or treating them as family, when we care about their growth and we care about their development, their families, and then we expose ourselves to getting hurt because now we actually care, right? And so now we're moving into the transformational side. But that was a challenge. I think for me, it was like when somebody would leave, I took it personally. Like I was like, it was painful, like to see somebody, I'm like, why would you not want to stay forever, right? So like I love you, I care about you, you know, and it's like, that was a hard thing for me. I had to really work through that. Do you find that sometimes when doctors, I mean, do doctors struggle with this? Is this something that or am I on an island? I mean, is this something that's more common than not, that people struggle? Maybe I'm just an emotional mess. I don't know. You tell me.
No, totally. I've got, what's coming to mind right now. I'm about to have a meeting with someone, and he has built this beautiful practice over the past 50 years. Many of the employees have been with him for decades, and he's departing. It's time for him to do something different. And it is a really emotional, I would even say it's synonymous with losing a loved one, because you've literally built this living, breathing environment, right? And fallen in love with these individuals, and they've helped you and you've helped them, and it's been a beautiful thing. And so that transition, it is a lot like a mourning process. And, but what I was hearing you say made me think too, when we hold ourselves back from that experience to stay safe, right? If it's more transactional, then we can just keep the emotions out of it. I would argue that we are experiencing the negative side in advance. So we've already decided it's going to be painful. And so what we're just going to do is bottle it all up and, keep it tucked in, which is also a painful experience. You try holding a basketball under the water, at some point your arms are going to give and it's going to come up with a splash. And so I think that's what ends up happening. You accidentally fall in love with one of your team members, just my hygienist. She's been with me for 20 years. Well, she also has things come up in her life and moves on at some point, or you do, or something happens. But I don't think we're ever able to completely safeguard from those emotional experiences, nor do I think we actually want to. I think we're just afraid of what it might be like.
Yeah, I think that's but I think the other thing is that, as I get older, I feel like I read people's energy more. I feel like I can almost cut through it. Like I feel somebody when they walk in the room. I can just say all right, what's wrong? Right. And I just know.
Yeah.
I think that when we're living in our authenticity and we actually care about people know. And I think that attracts those people that care about you as well, and care about the business and care about the patients. It's interesting because this is the type of work that people don't want to hear about, right? It's just tell me the KPI, just tell me how much you put in marketing this month. Tell me, do I need another operatory? And it's like the hard part is it's this qualitative type work is what builds the quantitative. It is what builds an amazing team. It is what builds profit margins. It is what ultimately builds growth. It ultimately builds retention. These things have the biggest impact on your organization's growth. We want to put them aside because we figure, well, that's harder to calculate, right? I just tell me what my accountant says. Well, there's no ratio, right? Your caring ratio or whatever you want, right? There's no ratio around that. But I think people know. And when you walk into a room, I had a FBI profiler once tell me that the human brain can pick up a lie within, like a 5,000th of a second, that it's wired to know when someone's telling the truth. So if you're really authentic and you care about people know you authentically care. If you are just saying it because you went to a workshop and you were told to say things like that, you should care, people know that too. And so I think this work that you do is so profound. I think the industry needs it. I think we all need it. I think that when we invest in ourselves, I'm a big advocate of taking a good portion of your income, at a minimum 10% of your total income, investing it back into you and in your own mindset and your beliefs and your ability to change and transform other people. And so I love the type of work you do. How do people get to know Chelsea? Like if someone says, hey, look, I want to know more about this amazing work that Chelsea does. Well, how would somebody get in contact with you, just reach you? How can they be part of some of the things you do?
Yeah, I'm on all the socials, my website, dentallife.coach, or you can just reach out to me personally on email, Chelsea, CHELSEA @dentallife.coach. And we can connect that way, but absolutely open to that. And One other thing I would say is I think in dental, we are almost in the habit of only looking in dental for the answer. And one thing that I've learned, having worked across different industries, and correct me if you have a different experience here, but when I look at the most successful people that I've ever met or spent time with, the wealthiest individuals, the people with those things that we put on our checklist of once I get there, then I'll feel this. I would encourage us in dental to not just look at who has the amount of practices that we have or that we want to have or the size business that we want to have. I would encourage us to just open our eyes and look around and say, okay, who has the type of demeanor that I want to have, that seems to be living the type of life experience that I want to live, regardless of where they made their success, and just figure out what they're doing differently. Because what I have found is that the people who are the happiest and most successful in tandem, they're doing what you're saying, Eric. They're investing in themselves. They're self-reflective. They're figuring out where they're confident. We like to hang out there, and they're figuring out where they're not, so that can also be an area of strength.
I couldn't agree more. If you're, it's interesting, people want to be happy, but they don't study happiness, right? They don't look for the signs. I mean, and then, then they go on Instagram or whatever. I was talking to a millennial the other day, and she was telling me that, she'd spent time with somebody. They saw this person who had like Lambos and all this other stuff and big mansions. And then they actually got to meet this person. They were like, oh, this was all not true. Right? So I think sometimes we're inundated by a world that doesn't exist. It's like, look for the people that are truly, genuinely happy. Look at the people that and I bring up Instagram because I think people are now being inundated by this idea of like, once I get, it's even more, right? It used to be there was rock stars or whatever, and then there was like Hollywood, and those people were who we looked at and said, those people have the life of lives. And then, of course, if you watch like the whole Where Are They Now, we would realize that's not the case. But the idea is that, these people there was only a few select people that had these things. And then now people are constantly inundating the marketplace. And it's happening in dental all the time too, which is this person has 6 locations, so they're happy. This person did this so they're happy. And so it's just another, I hate to use the word lie, but it almost is. It's like this idea of like, especially when people get to conventions, then they start to like jockey for who, it's like I always say dental conventions are sometimes the worst thing that can happen to someone's ego, because everybody's competitive and they get there and they want to talk about what they've got going on. And then we see their financials. We know what's actually happening. Like we get to see behind the veil. So we're like, okay, sure. That's what's really going on. Sure. Well, but I think that this idea of if you want to be happy, study happiness. Find people that are doing well. Find people that are successful. Find people that are impactful. Find people that are living their best lives. Find people that are my favorite client is he's living his best life, right? He is. And I look to that and just to say like when people live their best lives, when they're truly authentic, when they care about people, when they're building organizations of significance, when they're living in the here and now, when they're investing in themselves, when they're doing these types of things, it's like, and that's what I was talking about earlier in the podcast, which is this idea of, be grateful today. Like all the other stuff is great, but just because you're a billionaire doesn't mean you're any happier. In fact, you might walk through your big old empty house and go, wow, this is not that great. So it's because what those things that are relationships and transformations, being educated in certain type of work so that you can have conversations or do a self-reflection or whatever, those are tools that you provide, right? Those tools that you provide allow you, if you don't have the tools, it's like, well, I'll just do self-work. Well, that's difficult, right? It's like, I'll just do self-work. I think having tools, having someone like you who can help somebody grow themselves, grow their team, grow their leaders, grow in significance, I think it's impactful. I can't thank you enough for being here today. Every time I talk to you, Chelsea, I want to learn more and more and more. I'm like, I want to know more about what you do, because this industry and all industries needs more people like you, more people that are kind of waving that flag of saying, hey, listen, if you want significance, it starts with you and leadership and those types of things. And so I can't thank you enough for being here today. I'm super excited.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you guys are watching, we will put her email, how to contact her, all of that in the actual video itself. We'll put it in the description. So make sure you guys reach out to Chelsea, have a conversation with her, see how she can help you guys out. I know a lot of you guys are very successful doctors, but I think you guys could use some of this work. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have a guest on. Thank you, Mr. Morin, for hopping in here, doing a great podcast.
I'm glad to be here. But just one side note as we finish is that there's an extra credit, which is Reese. I've got jury duty coming up too. So just tell me how you got out of it. Like, well, I'll throw that on as like the extra, how to get out of jury duty without like the extra thing. I don't know how you got out of jury duty. I know what's going to happen. I got jury duty coming up in like 2 weeks. I know they're going to make me the dang foreman, and I know I'm going to be there. It'll be like the next 6 months. I'll be on like the Scopes trial or something. I'll be like 6 months or 8 months. They'll be like, I don't know what happened to Eric. So anyhow, glad to have everyone here. Glad to be here. Glad to have everyone listening to the podcast. Look, reach out to Chelsea. She's a really, really awesome, nice person. Yeah, gosh, we all need this. We all need this stuff. We all need someone to look at, behind the veil and help us improve our mindset, and it just might change your life. So glad to have this podcast.